Welcome back to Fast Politics, fan favorite, bestie, Rick Wilson.
Man About Town, the whole
Ma-
thing. Thank you. How are you
That's
today?
right. Man about town if that town is in Florida.
Yes.
Under
Speaking of
kind of
of
undermines the whole thing.
kind of, yeah. Speaking of Florida, I live, as you know, in the middle of a giant ocean of red,
Yes.
and yet somehow in the capital of Florida yesterday, 5,000 people turned up at a protest for No Kings. Like I had never I mean, I've lived here a long time, and ordinarily, the progressive world manages to get a protest with about a half a dozen people on the steps of the Capitol and one weird sign. This thing was wall to wall blocks around the Capitol, which was nuts.
In
In
Tallahassee,
Tallahassee,
Florida.
a state that has been dominated by the Republican Party for the last 25 years, managed to have two sort of scrubby looking MAGA kids 3 blocks away holding one sign as a counter protest. So I don't know what's going on, but that seemed to be iterating across the whole country. I had a buddy of mine in Billings, Montana, crowds in the street like you couldn't believe. He goes, "When I tell you this is half the city, I mean it." It's crazy.
What do you think that means? The numbers I saw, Elliot Morris,
Yep, yep.
uh,
Smart guy.
smart guy, used to run 538, and he had sort of calculated the numbers as higher than 5 million. I saw 5 million in the New York Times, but Elliot Morris thinks it's closer to more than that.
Yeah, he
And
said I think he said something like it could be up to 13 million people,
yes,
which is nuts.
so up to 13 million people gets us to a level where about we're almost to, I think, a little bit less than 1% of America
Yeah.
protesting,
That's what
right?
they call the color revolution line. When you have 1 or 2% of the population out protesting, the dear leaders have lost a lot of power.
And some are saying, I'm gonna use a Jesse Cannon fact check here. Some are saying that this was the biggest protest in American history.
Listen, I could make that argument. I think there was something yesterday in the air across the country. I think there was a little bit of whistling past the graveyard at first, like people like,
Right.
"Oh god, what if this doesn't turn out? What if this doesn't work?" And it was bonkers everywhere.
And
It
I
was
was
nuts.
so I was in Nantucket because I have a book that just came out, which I don't know if
Do you? Do people know about it? Is it a New York Times bestseller? Yes, it is.
number 6 on the combined list.
Get
I
it
have to
get it?
tell you, there are no words for the level of thrill. But anyway, I was in but, it's I'm the meme where it's like the world is burning down, and I'm like, "So I have a book." Um, but but, uh, I was in Nantucket for this book fair. Nantucket is known to be, well, in the Northeast, a very Republican island, so much so that
Very.
the guy sitting in front of me was wearing a Trump golf club a shirt that had a sort of small insignia that said Trump, Jupiter or whatever. But I wanna talk about this. It was a huge protest in Nantucket, which is a Republican island. So it is really does feel like these places where you don't expect to see protests, we're seeing big
Right,
protests.
right. I think this happened to the surprise of a lot of the MAGA folks yesterday because the gigantic MAGA media machine was in full throttle, like, there are nobody's at the No Kings rallies. There are No Kings rallies whatsoever. No one's out at all, but 5 million people are in Washington for the president's military dictatorship parade.
Right. So let's talk about the military dictatorship parade because there's a really smart thing I saw that the individual No Kings rally
Mhm.
organizers wrote on their website, which said, and even Axios, which is like known to not be
Not
uh
exactly, like, friend of progressive politics, Axios.
yes, exactly. Said that the people they wanted to provide a kind of counter programming and not a competition, and that's why they didn't go to Washington D.C., right? They stayed away because they wanted to sort of dominate the news cycle and provide an alternative narrative versus a sort of combative
Yeah, like,
sort of
see what we can
program.
do, yeah.
Right, program around Trumpism, which I think is really an important thought when you're talking about sort of permeating the discourse.
Look, I think that that the grassroots energy in this thing was so unique, and I will, whip back to my experience at one of these yesterday. I actually saw 3 or 4 of my Republican friends who aren't even, like, people I would have thought, like, "Oh, he's a never Trumper." I was surprised. I talked to one guy, I was like, "I'm shocked to see you here." He goes, "I'm just done." And I think that
Wow.
they correctly calibrated that you would get a broader uplift from this if it didn't feel like it was just, like, one more sort of generic "fuck Trump" thing, and you opened it up and people felt a lot more sense of community about it. I just I don't go to a lot of marches and shit, but
Yeah.
this was impressive and it was optimistic, and there were a lot of American flags flying and a lot of people who got the memo, who understood the assignment, as they say.
I wanna talk about, disinformation because it is really important when we talk about these protests to talk about Twitter and what happened on Twitter and the political violence. A woman and her husband,
Yep.
Minnesota her
Former
name
House Majority Leader in the
former
Minnesota.
House Majority Leader Melissa Horman and her husband
Mhm.
murdered in their beds. 2 other members of the Minnesota State House,
Were attached.
both
Yep.
Melissa Horman and her husband and John Hoffman and his wife,
Right.
okay, murdered in their beds by a conservative Christian, anti-choice, anti-demo
Anti-gay,
right. It worked in private security, carried weapons, etcetera. Murdered
evangelical. I mean,
right, evangelical.
all of the unsurprising descriptors of this guy that once you knew them, you were like, "Of course."
So this happened. He is now on the run. A few thoughts here. One,
Mhm.
these were the people who were being watched by the FBI before Kash Patel got in charge.
Right?
Now you're no longer allowed to watch these people because those people are
Because
Trump's
right,
people,
because
right?
the deep state was watching them and the we can't have anybody monitored by the deep state anymore because obviously they were the same sort of innocent tourists that were
Right.
just visiting with love on January
January
6th.
6th. So the day this happened, Twitter became a sea of disinformation. And the MAGAs were trying to sell a story that these people had voted against healthcare for
Right.
non-citizens. And
Yep.
that was why they got murdered by a Marxist.
Right, and so you get guys like Mike Cernovich and Mike Lee and the rest of this sort of
One
trash.
is a senator, one is an online influencer who started Pizzagate.
Right, right. Well,
They're
yeah,
basically the
well,
same.
look, these are not they're not sending their best, Molly.
Right.
Um,
Right.
but what we're talking about here when you get down to it is this alternate ecosystem that cannot confront reality. They cannot confront what is actually happening here, which is that the right-wing MAGA media ecosystem feeds these people a constant diet of lies and bullshit that 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 every Democrat is a cannibal, pedophile, child trafficker, blah blah blah. And when one of their own commits a crime like this, a horrifying crime, they believe they can troll their way out of the problem.
Right. Right.
And so we end up with a situation like yesterday, which a US Senator, Mike Lee, who abso-freaking-lutely knows better, okay,
Yes.
is
He is
out.
also a United States senator.
Yes, let's emphasize that point again. A United States senator, is out talking the worst weird ass smack about, pretending that this was a political assassination because of wokeness. I and
Right.
it's so disgusting at every level. It's so weak at every level because they recognize that what they've created is a monster. And that monster is now out roaming the world, and it's frankly, yesterday, murdered 2 people. The guy
Right.
in his car had a hit list of 70 other elected Democratic officials that
People
he wanted to
like
kill.
my friend Tim Walz.
Yes, and folks, like Ilhan Omar and a whole variety of other people that does not exactly fit the profile of left winger on a
Right.
murder spree. This was
Right.
a right wing assassin. He's been motivated by people like, or by institutions like Breitbart and Fox News because they're told over and over again, you're being pursued by the evil left wingers. They're trying to destroy you. They're not human. They deserve everything we can give them in terms of political and personal violence. And the
Mhm.
whole thing is a utterly predictable and repulsive set of behaviors that I don't think I don't think I sometimes think I've lost the capacity to be shocked, but I clearly haven't because I'm this one is shocking even to me.
First of all, Mark Cuban, if you listen to this podcast, you should buy Twitter, okay?
Yeah,
Because somebody rich should buy Twitter and make it normal again because Elon has made it completely unusable, and it has a really good purpose, and it's really a
sure.
public utility, and, Elon is down the rabbit hole now of whatever, it's time to buy Twitter.
Yeah, I mean, look, and frankly, you could probably get Twitter at a pretty reasonable price at this point.
Yeah. So that is number 1 because the site has degraded, but it also is what you see, it's completely without use at this
But it's
moment.
also but here's the thing, the degree to which the right values Twitter, because it is this normative force for them. It is this
Right.
powerful thing that keeps them in line, that keeps them on message, and over again, I don't I've said this to a lot of wealthy people recently, like, the power of Fox, Facebook, and Twitter to control what the MAGA world thinks and does is
Yeah.
beyond comprehension. It is super powerful as a way of shaping what they believe, what they see, what they read, and it is also empowers people who, again, think they control their way out of a mass murder or an
Right.
attempted mass murder by one of Donald Trump's fervent supporters.
Yeah.
And it did blow up in their faces a bit like, "Oh, yes, obviously, he's just like every other liberal who's been a registered Republican for 22 years, has a private security company, and so on and so on."
Yeah. Yeah.
It's the silliness of this shit is beyond.
Yeah. No, of course, and it's totally, ridiculous. But there was also I wanna talk about there was a little bit of violence that happened yesterday that I wanna talk about because I think it's really important,
Okay.
and it didn't get reported because there's no local news, so you may be listening to this podcast and you may not know about it, so most of the rallies were peaceful, but, okay, there were in Salt Lake City, somebody got critically injured. They shot into the crowd,
Yep.
and in Culpeper, Virginia, somebody
Mhm.
drove their SUV into the crowd. So those are 2 real things that happened.
Oh, you mean political violence?
Yeah,
Oh,
I mean, political
I
violence.
was told that only happens on the left.
Yeah,
Huh, weird.
political violence, I don't think it should be brushed over, right?
We should address it more honestly than the right would like. And they really
Yeah,
don't wanna talk about this. They want to
yeah,
pretend that they are the set upon victims. They're the David to the Goliath of some sort of
mhm,
violent progressive action, which
yeah,
has been and has always been garbage. And look, believe me, if I saw it on the left, I'd call it out
mhm.
because
Well,
it benefits no one.
yeah, it's certainly true. I wonder if we could talk for a minute about how Trump actually had to watch the parade?
Oh, it was so beautiful.
Like, I wonder if he didn't think this through.
No, he never thinks anything through, Molly. He has no ability to, like, think outside of his, like, tiny animal brain, and he thought, "This will be a great triumph. I will look strong. I will, by association, absorb the strength of these warriors," and he looked like a dipshit, half asleep, behind the glass at a poorly attended and by poorly attended, folks, I mean poorly attended.
Yeah.
They were expecting 1,000,000 people, and they maybe got 50,000. The mall was empty. Trump's reviewing stand had empty seats directly across from it, which if you're a political advance guy, get another job tomorrow because you fucked up.
But also, can we just talk about, like, why did this need to be sponsored by Coinbase and, Boeing? Or I think
It
Coinbase,
was Coinbase
Lockheed,
and,
Lockheed Martin.
yeah, look, it was a bunch of there were a bunch of corporate sponsors
But
involved,
but
but
weren't the taxpayers really the sponsors of this
yeah,
parade?
that was exactly what I was about to say, Molly, but the real sponsor was, the US taxpayer.
Yeah,
The real sponsor was every American who had to fork over their tax dollars for this $85,000,000 or $89,000,000 horse shit,
yeah.
and the reality is Trump begged for a missile parade in the first administration. He was
Yep, when he
obsessed.
saw one in France at
That's right.
Bastille Day that
He was
Macron
obsessed with
showed
it,
him.
and now he finally got one. He didn't have an Esper or a Millie who said, "No, sir, you can't do this."
Yeah, Millie was like, "No dice."
Yeah, Millie was like, no, boss. No, chief, this ain't how this
Mm.
works."
Yeah.
Um, but, he desperately wanted this. Again, Donald Trump, the draft dodging chicken shit coward who demeaned and diminished John McCain, who called our troops suckers and losers, who has over and over again essentially expressed his contempt for the service of others, wanted to absorb the heroism of American military men and women. I mean, I found the whole thing so crass and stupid and badly run because, you have these guys marching by and it's like, "Brought to you by Coinbase, sponsored by UFC." And it's just like, "Oh, come on, dude."
Yeah. It was incredible stuff. Incredible stuff. Rick Wilson, thank you
Molly
for joining
Jong-Fast.
me.
A pleasure as always.
Will you be back?
I will always be back for you. You know that.